On behalf of Ellie's family, thank you for attending this festival of words and music today to honour and reflect on the life of Ellie, who by any measure was a remarkable woman. She was strong-minded, resilient, funny, brave and courageous, creative, much loved, with a huge capacity for loving, and she has left a lasting legacy during her lifetime. My name's Judy Orlick. I'm a civil celebrant and I feel privileged to be conducting this festival today. The family would like me to warmly invite you to join them for tea and cake in the church hall at the end of this service. In typical fashion, Ellie didn't want all these beautiful flowers to go to waste, so she's asked that anyone who would like to take some at the conclusion, please do so. There are some plastic bags at the rear of the church for this purpose. You'll note that I'm not dressed very formally, given that I'm conducting this service. You'll not be surprised to know that Ellie had quite firm ideas on how her funeral was to be conducted. She wanted it to be a focus on family and friends and the relationships that she had with you all. She wanted no pomp, no fuss, and her family thought it was very fitting that the undertakers came for her in an aged Ford Falcon. There were to be no funereal colours. Her plan was for bright colours, probably shorts and t-shirts. But while she managed to plan most of the details, she could not control the weather. And I can see that most of you are very sensibly dressed for winter. This funeral service may not be like others that you've been to. Ellie didn't want a traditional funeral service. She described this service as a festival of words and music, both of which meant so very much to her. So what will follow will be a time of reflection with some of Ellie's favourite music and some readings that were specially meaningful to her. The readers will be Andy Coombs, Roger Trump, Helen Forbes, Joe Taylor, Fleur Limbrick, Kelly Frame, Mel Harwood and Sharon Lindley. The poetry and readings were very carefully chosen by Ellie. So as you listen to the words spoken, reflect on their meaning. You will find these words printed in your programs. And as the music plays, remember the different facets of Ellie you knew and how she touched your lives. Ellie died in the early hours of Monday morning, at home, surrounded by those she loved. When Nigel and Ellie married, they exchanged vows, including the words, "To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, unto death do us part." Nigel honoured these vows every day, as he tenderly nursed Ellie, along with help from Celia, her mother, and her much-loved boys, Sam and Ollie. The family would especially like to thank Dr. David Yates for his care of Ellie right to the end, which enabled her family to nurse her and for her to be able to die at home. He was so much more to her than just her GP. He's not here today as he's just flown out on a long ago booked family trip. Had Ellie still needed him, he would have postponed this trip. The family is very grateful for all that he did. Ellie was the daughter of Celia and Brian, the sister of James, the beloved wife of Nigel, the devoted mother of Sam and Ollie, an aunt to many nieces and nephews, a very dear and valued friend to so many. My daughter Jessie was fortunate to have been one of those friends. Ellie was her guiding light, the giver of wise counsel, a mentor, and so much more. One of Ellie's last craft projects was to knit a beautiful blanket for Jessie's baby, born just 9 days ago. Tiny Azalea is wrapped in it today. Ellie was also working on a quilt. It contained her life and the lives of her loved ones, but it remains unfinished. Celia has taken it back to England, where she will complete it for her daughter. Most of you know her as Ellie, but to Brian and Celia she is Elizabeth, and to others in the UK she is Liz. Welcome Celia and Brian as you watch with others from the UK. The family is planning a memorial service for Ellie in England later in the year. It will be held in the village where she grew up and where Celia and Brian still live, in the church where she married Nigel and where they renewed their vows on a special anniversary not so long ago. Ellie was also, well, I guess you can say the mother to Flo, her 12-year-old faithful Tibetan terrier. Some of you may already know that we actually have Flo to thank for the Trump family being here with us in Australia. Flo had a litter of 9 handsome pups, and it was the sale of these puppies that financed a family holiday to Australia. They loved it so much that Nigel decided to accept a posting here from the Royal Navy. So next time you see Flo, make sure you give her an extra pat. Ellie's death was a premature end to a vibrant life and a terrible loss grieved by us all. We are here to honour her life today, to remember her with love and reflect on what she meant to each of us. Ellie was important to us in different ways and in very special ways. And in the time we spend together, you can reflect on the times you had with her and be grateful for those times. But we've also come together to say our goodbyes and to fondly and gently farewell Ellie. It's important to take the time to acknowledge our loss and sadness. All of us have been here have been touched by Ellie's death today, and we will be able to support each other as we grieve and farewell her. She didn't want us to dwell on the sadness or on the years we won't have with her. She wanted us to remember her just as she was. Shed some tears and say goodbye. Be grateful with everyone here for having Ellie in our lives and for the times you had. Speak her name often. Don't let memories get lost. Share the memories around, laugh about them, and enjoy recalling them. Now I'd like to ask Andy to come forward and read to us Gratitude by Oliver Sacks.
My predominant feeling is one of gratitude. I have loved and been loved. I have been given much, and I have given something in return. Above all, I have been a sentient being, a thinking animal on this beautiful planet, and that in itself has been an enormous privilege and adventure.
And now Roger's going to read for us Who Am I?
Who am I, you ask? I am made from all the people I've encountered and all the things I've experienced. Inside, I hold the laughter of my friends, the arguments with my parents, the chattering of young children, and the warmth from kind strangers. Inside, there are stitchings from cracked hearts, bitter words from heated arguments, music that gets me through, and emotions I cannot convey. I am made from all these people and moments. This is who I am.
Thank you, Roger. Helen, could you come forward now and deliver the elegy? Helen's a dear friend who worked with Ellie in the library at Girls Grammar.
I feel very honoured to have been asked to give this eulogy today. Much of what I'm going to say, Judith's already said, but it's worth remembering again. We're here to farewell, honour and express our enormous love for an extraordinary woman who did more with her life than a lot of people who've lived twice as long ever do. 2 fabulous sons, a good marriage, and a life lived courageously with grace and dignity to the end. We are so grateful to have shared part of her life. Elizabeth Kate Walker, or Ellie or Liz, was born in 1967 in North Devon in the UK. And when she was 11, she moved with her parents Celia and Brian and her brother James to the West Indies. There, after a time, Ellie and her girls' school discovered that they were not a match made in heaven. And Ellie returned to the UK to stay with a close family friend, Miranda, for the following 5 months. There she enjoyed a co-ed school and the freedom that life in Jamaica had not allowed. In 1990, the first of her 2 beloved sons, Sam, was born. In 1993, she married Nigel. A week after the wedding, they left for the US, and Ollie was born there in 1994. That made 4, and what a tight unit it's been. Ellie touched so many people in the world, and there are many who would be with us here today if they could. Because they couldn't come and see her, typical of Ellie, she travelled to the UK to say her goodbyes to those she loved over there while she was still well enough. Most of the words I'm going to say today aren't mine. They come from family, friends and colleagues here and abroad. But I know that every one of us here will feel as though they're ours. They're also Ellie's words. I can almost now hear her saying, with a smile, "Get on with it." When I was first thinking about what I was going to say today, I sat looking out across the sea at a place where Ellie and Nigel had stayed with me and remembered precious moments with them, as we have all done. It was hard not to be overwhelmed by grief, but it was also hard not to be overwhelmed by all that she'd achieved. However, I had been given my instructions quite firmly. When Ellie and I sat down to talk about today and how she would like to be remembered, she asked me to stress that there was to be no list of achievements. For her, what was more important was that love had been the overarching theme in her life, and that love had shaped who she was. From when she was a small child, she'd had a great sense of being loved, even though, she admitted, she had not always been gracious in accepting it. She never doubted this love, and this gave her an advantage. The love of her parents allowed her to be a loving mum to Sam. She enjoyed lots of emotional help and support. Her mother, Celia, constantly told her what a great job she was doing with Sam. This love then flowed on to Nigel and to Ollie. There was nothing she was more passionate about in this world than her 3 boys, her chaps, as Kate called them. She was proudest of her relationships with her parents, husband, children and friends. That was her achievement. No matter what Sam and Ollie chose to do, her concern was that above all else they were happy. She loved them unconditionally and was chuffed that they not only loved her, but that they liked her and wanted to spend time with her. In them, we see 2 splendid young men. We see her love and care for others reflected. She also stressed how much she honoured her marriage to Nigel. When I first met her, she would tell me how much it annoyed her, and annoyed is my word as a replacement for her word, when everybody constantly told her how wonderful Nigel was. But I soon came to see how proud she was of him and her marriage, and how deep was their love. For her family, the sorrow at the loss of Ellie will be deep and long-lasting, even though she's done everything possible to make all this as easy as it could ever be. She prized loyalty, compassion, and those who've loved and supported her over the years. Her own compassion knew no bounds. She was able to make real contact with people, to help, to communicate, to accept without conditions, and to forge indissoluble ties with such a range of people. In every aspect of her life, people were drawn to her, whether it was in her professional life, her voluntary work at the hospice, or her many other activities. She became a willing listener and a natural counsellor. Her colleagues in the library remember her wonderful rapport with the students and her desire to share her love of books with them. Even though she would shout at them when they rang the bell, she was not to be summoned like that, and not surprisingly, the bell disappeared. She could also be found sitting quietly talking to staff who appreciated her wisdom and her care. She respected honesty and was never one to concede to convention, pompous behaviour or insincerity. Her friendships were deep and strong. Ellie and Nigel's hospitality was legendary. Sunday roasts, lunch on the terrace, and one Christmas New Year while in the UK, they hired a huge house on the wilds of Exmoor so all their friends and family could join them. In preparation for New Year's Eve, there was a full military-style shopping expedition across the moors to the nearest village, Dulverton. Never one to do things by half, Ellie decorated the long table in the old kitchen and the whole room with candles. So many that the heat cracked a very large serving platter on which tea lights were arranged. The food was amazing and the night was joyous, with all age groups joining in the after-dinner games. But Ellie was no saint. She was feisty, iconoclastic, and she didn't hesitate to tell you if she thought you were being stupid. On the other hand, she could be incredibly gentle and loved beautiful things and loved creating them. Almost to the end, she was still stitching this beautiful quilt Julie mentioned for Nigel. When she first lived in Canberra, she had a stall at the bus depot market, something I only discovered the other day, where she sold beautiful picture frames adapted for the hanging of necklaces. She also expressed her creative self through her clothes. Dressing was a serious business. Several wrote about it. Her mother said that as a little girl she wanted yellow clogs. Yes, yellow. After much searching, Celia managed to find them. I think Nigel was there. There was a picture there with Ellie in her yellow clogs. From there, she progressed through dungarees, rainbow laces, mini bikinis, according to her mother, and much else. Later, according to a friend, it was dungarees and flowery beads in her hair. Her ultimate design coup was one of her prosthetics, adorned with flowers and worn with pride and courage. And that courage and strength never wavered. There have been so many times when lesser mortals would have folded, but not our Ellie. She always found a way not only to confront the brick wall, but also to help those around her cope with it. But she was never a Pollyanna, and she never gilded the lily. Often she soothed with her candid, often ribald and very wicked humour. She had a wonderful laugh and an ability to make others laugh. Her humour could range from the very erudite and witty to black to just plain bawdy. Her blog told the story of her prostitute. Ellie's prosthetist was Andrew. Nige couldn't pronounce prosthetist, so it became prostitute. She wrote hilarious, self-deprecating descriptions of herself learning to swim again after the amputation. I remember a wild careening down the street in a wheelchair after a concert one freezing, rainy night. It could have been an absolute disaster, but she was laughing all the way, and so was her friend who was driving the wheelchair. Life was an adventure. It was to be lived. It was to be experienced. When Nigel was away at sea and the boys were at school, she completed her studies in English literature at Plymouth University and hobbled up onto the stage with her leg in plaster and on crutches, thank you so much, to collect her degree, her mother and the boys cheering on. Sense of adventure at the ready in 2000. Sense of adventure at the ready in 2008, the family moved out to Australia after a holiday here, as Judy mentioned. They'd loved the sun, the sea, and the open, easy way of life here. How lucky were we? Ellie was so passionate about so many aspects of her life: music, art, literature, the sea, helping others, sharing her experiences. In her life, she always aspired to have the courage to change when that was needed. She was fiery, she was gutsy, passionate, strong, and she always believed in hope. I want to share some of the words from beautiful letters written to Ellie by friends and family who can't be here. And this section I'm going to read from Chris's letter is in response to the poem that we just heard, Who Am I? And Chris wrote, "For every part of you that is made up of all the other people from your life, there is a part of you that you are leaving in everyone you have touched. A part of you that has influenced, taught, loved and cared for others, which will never leave, and which will be passed down through humanity till the end of time and beyond. What a gift your life has been." And Jessie wrote, "Sleep tight, have amazing dreams, look after us all if we look like we're going to do something stupid. You're in our hearts and know that we all love you." And lastly, from Kate, who speaks for us all, "Love you to bits, my brave, beautiful friend." Having said all this about her, Ellie simply and humbly saw herself as a small part of the universe. She told me her aim in her life had been, and I quote her, "to be the best human being I can be." And she was. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And now, Joe, could you please come forward and read to us The Road Not Taken? Pardon? Do we have music? We do. We do have music first, and it's Let the River Run by Mark Wilkinson.
Soft lights are dancing out like fireflies, drifting on by now as they come back. And I see the years falling before my eyes. Oh, cover me, won't you cover me? Let the river run. Let the river run. Let the river run. Let the wave fall. Let the river run. Let the waves go. Let the river run. Let the river run. Let the river run. And the waves fall on my soul there. Let the river run. And the waves crash over and over. Let the river run. 'Cause my journey's begun. From my new world, never to return. From my new world, never to return. So let the river run. Let the river run. It's run, 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 run. It's run, 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 run.
And now, Joe, could you come forward and read The Road Not Taken?
Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I did doubt I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood. And I took the one less travelled by. And that has made all the difference.
Thank you, Joe. And now, Ross, could you please come forward and read Shh? No? No, Fleur. Thank you, Fleur.
Don't kiss me yet. Just rest your lips against my mouth while I taste the faintest touch of you. But breathe me while our senses scan the past until we're here, curves and angles, resting comfortably, complex lives, a perfect fit. Then I take up your hair, half autumn leaves, half sun, and spread the strands upon the pillow, the web of one night's life. Then breathe me while I pin your outstretched arm to the edge of the world, and breathe me as moonlight spreads to show the light and dark we've both come through to be here. And breathe me one last time, and only then, please move your mouth a millimetre more until it enters mine.
Thank you, Fleur. And now John's going to play for us To a Wild Rose. Thank you, John. Now, Kelly, could you come forward, please? Kelly's going to read For the Things You See, written by her.
For the Things You See, for Ellie. But you are more for divining all, the phantom character in those so grey around you. For the things you see are what's real, yet best in me, in we. And for all the things you see, I see all of you. I see the fancies, passions, dashes of a life that defied the matrices of the suburban plan, with music, swatches, lovers, and a dress to floor Roger Moore. You saw it all and wanted more. I see the 6 weeks of heartbeats, and that yes, beginning happily ever, swept away on a boat that sailed the road. Babies, dissertations, and the globe. You crafted, read, and wrote. You lived the moments that you saw. I never saw the gremlins steal inside your eyes when they ate the light, your guide. Yet even then, you glimpsed love, which lifted the gloomy parasol. And with the law of shade and bright, you saw the way so that others might. I see you parade the carnage of your demons, a survivor, the nightingale of the battlefield of that universal war. You and your higher power, your power. You see with faith, inviting hope. So now our sights are set on the after. You're no jigsaw photo mosaic, but an emanation, full and luminous and numinous, animated by the blessings and those you bless, the people in your life. And for all these things that you see, I see all of you.
Thank you, Kelly. Now Mel is going to read to us from an extract from The Night Circus.
The finished clock. The finished clock is resplendent. At first glance, it is simply a clock. A rather large black clock with a white face and a silver pendulum. It's well crafted, obviously, with intricately carved woodwork edges and a perfectly painted face. But it's just a clock. But that is before it is wound, before it begins to tick. The pendulum swinging steadily and evenly, then it becomes something else. The changes are slow. First, the colour changes in the face. It shifts from white to grey, and then there are clouds that float across it, disappearing when they reach the opposite side. Meanwhile, bits of the body of the clock expand and contract like pieces of a puzzle, as though the clock is falling apart slowly and gracefully. And all of this, it takes hours. The face of the clock becomes a darker grey and then black, with twinkling stars where numbers had been previously. The body of the clock, which has been methodically turning itself inside out and expanding, is now entirely subtle shades of white and grey. And it is not just pieces, it is figures and objects, perfectly carved flowers and planets and tiny books with actual paper pages that turn. There is a silver dragon that curls around part of the now visible clockwork, a tiny princess in a carved tower who paces in distress, awaiting an absent prince. Teapots that pour into teacups and minuscule curls of steam that rise from them as the seconds tick. Wrapped presents open, small cats chase small dogs. An entire game of chess is played. At the centre, where a cuckoo bird would live in a more traditional timepiece, is the juggler. Dressed in harlequin style with a grey mask, he juggles shiny silver balls that correspond to each hour. As the clock chimes, another ball joins the rest, until at midnight he juggles 12 balls in a complex pattern. After midnight, the clock begins once more to fold in upon itself. The face lightens and the cloud returns. The number of juggled balls decreases until the juggler himself vanishes. By noon, it is a clock again and no longer a dream.
Thank you, Mel. We're now going to listen to our last piece of music. And whilst it's more than 6 minutes, it's one that Ellie wanted to be played in its entirety. Hold your memories close as you listen and recall the many ways in which she's enriched your lives. Sharon, could you please come forward and read for us Time?
Time is not measured by the years that you live, but by the deeds that you do and the joy that you give. And each day as it comes brings a chance to each one to live to the fullest and leave nothing undone that would brighten the life or lighten the load of some weary traveller lost on life's road. So what does it matter how long we may live, if as long as we live, we unselfishly give?
Thank you, Sharon. Ellie would now like you to join with me in saying the Serenity Prayer. It's printed in your programs. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking this world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you in the next. In a moment, I will ask you to stand as we farewell Ellie, and I would ask you all to remain in the church as Ellie leaves. Nigel, Sam and Ollie will accompany her and have some private moments with her outside, and as the music concludes, I will tell you when it's time for you to join them. Ellie will continue to live in your hearts as you have shared your lives with her, and she's contributed so much to what and who you are now. May you find comfort and richness in your memories and support and strength in your love for each other. We now lovingly and reverently bid Ellie farewell. Could you please now stand? It's now time for us to all leave the church. I fucked up 2Q.